Kia ora koutou, ko Rosamund toku ingoa, ko ingarangi te whakapaparangi mai, engari ko o tatahi te whenua tupu ke whakatū awe noho ana, tēnā koutou. So my name's Rosamund Feeney, and as Angela said, I work in Nelson Public Libraries. I'm the Community Connections librarian, but I also do a bit of training. And I'm going to start sharing my screen now so you guys can see my PowerPoint. All right. So hopefully everybody can see that okay. Just let me know in the chat if you can't. So basically my aim today is I'm going to talk about the core competencies training model, but my session is also focused on making this something that you can walk away at the end with the foundations for your own model to bring back to your workplace. So a little bit of background to this. The core competencies training model is something that I developed with my colleague Katie Sellers back in 2019, so just before COVID, and we implemented it around 2020. Since then, we presented at the LIANZA conference 2021 about this, and we were amazed and really excited to see how much interest there was in it. We still get emails from people who attended that presentation asking questions. And for us, that just really was almost a, oh, it's not just us moment, that yeah, training library staff is really tough and it's a shared problem. So we wanted to deliver this webinar workshop-y type presentation to everyone to answer some of the questions that people might have. Since then, Katie has taken on a new role in council. So I just want to acknowledge that she's not here today, but she has been so instrumental and done a lot of mahi towards this. But I also think it really says something about this training module that it can continue when one of the people who set it up has left and taken on a new role. So a little bit of context. There we go. Why do we need training? That's a great question to ask. Why do we need training? Why should we bother? Libraries are just books, right? They're not. We all know this, and I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but libraries are amazing places to work. Our staff come from a variety of backgrounds. We might have teachers, nurses, ex-communications people, ex-business owners, and we work with people of all kinds. We have the young, the old, the vulnerable. We have people needing books, people needing tech help, maybe people needing to use a sewing machine. They're really not just a building, but they're a space where anyone from the community can go to meet others, to learn new skills, to ask a question. And with that, a library is built around its people. And that's really exciting. It provides a lot of opportunities in what we can offer as part of our services. I mean, who would have thought 5 years ago that libraries would have sewing machines that you can borrow, that Te Ranga would have a podcasting recording station, that we'd have VR headsets. That's so exciting. There's no limitations. But with that, there's obviously a lot of challenges. So we need to keep up with the needs of our users, and we need to keep our staff feeling skilled and feeling confident. Ongoing training really is a necessary part of the job when you're working in a space that develops alongside a community. So that, in a nutshell, is why we need training and why training needs to be an always growing thing. So that was kind of the context we had at our library. We were really aware of all of these changing needs of the community. But what we found is we had a challenge in that there were inconsistent services across our 3 branches. So in Nelson, we have our main town library and 2 community branches. And we found that when staff had different skills, there was different service at each of them. So you might have customers coming in saying, oh, I've come to this library because I know your techie person's here today. Or, oh, I'm going to come in on that afternoon because I know that's when that person's working and they're really good at this. And that's great. We use the skills of our staff, but it's not very helpful for our customers. And it's not helpful in developing our staff confidence. So we had a lack of staff confidence. We also wanted to create a culture of knowledge sharing. So not knowing how to do something can create a lot of fear, we found in our staff, and we wanted not knowing how to do something to make them feel excited and motivated to learn, but also to learn from their colleagues. And that's just beneficial when you start to think about things like succession planning. So like most of you, our main challenge was lack of training time. Lack of time for anything, I think, is really common in libraries. We hear this all the time from everybody. What we did have was every Wednesday morning before our library opens, we have 1 hour for a full staff meeting or team meetings. And that's a really valuable thing. If your library can find time to do this, to bring your staff, your part-timers, your fixed-term contracts, your casuals, people at the branch libraries, everyone together in one room, that's so worthwhile. And for us, our library actually opens half an hour later Wednesday mornings to accommodate this. And that, I think, is really, really key in making it work. But as you can imagine, when that time's so valuable and when everyone's together, it kind of gets hijacked by operational things, by notices, outside speakers, council updates. And so our training sessions were being moved or shortened to make room for other items. And we also found that the training we did do wasn't always relevant. So, for example, we might have a qualified reference librarian sitting there on a session about ancestry.com. And there might be IT people learning how to install an app for an hour, and it might be the third time they've sat through that training. We also found that there was no time to practice afterwards. So you can imagine a Wednesday morning, first thing, sitting there being talked to, because our staff, there could be 40 to 50 people in the one room. There wasn't, it would finish, you'd stand up, you'd walk away, and staff, understandably, would just totally forget what they'd sat through. So we needed that time to practice. We needed to make it more relevant. We needed to make it knowledge sharing, and we needed to make our training consistent. And one of our challenges back in 2019, when Katie and I started talking about this, we did a lot of research, and we found that all libraries in Aotearoa had this problem, and there wasn't really an existing model. One thing we did find, which was really handy, and I'll link to this in the last slide when I've got resources, and I'll share it in the chat as well, was the American Library Association had a core competency statement and document, and that was awesome. So we found that, and then we started to talk about what we wanted to achieve in our library. So confidence, as I've said, that was kind of our number one thing. Confidence, not necessarily knowing all the answers, but really feeling okay in finding the answer if they don't know it when they get asked something out on the library floor. We wanted self-directed learning. So we wanted staff to think, oh gosh, we've got this new library app. I don't know how to use that. I might play around on my phone and have a go. Coincidentally, a few weeks ago, there was a LIANZA webinar from Mary Ellen Bates about career resilience, and she said we should be asking ourselves, what do we need to learn right now? And that's kind of the culture we wanted to create. So I really loved how she just captured that in that one phrase. We also wanted a training model that's flexible for the community. So something that's going to grow and change along with the needs of the people walking through the library doors. I mean, 3 years ago, we didn't think that we'd need to have so much knowledge around things like Real Me login when we got the vaccine passports. So that's just one little example. Job seeker stuff, updating CVs, that's become really prevalent, at least in our library, since COVID. So it needed to be flexible. Yes, for community and staff. And we wanted that knowledge sharing to come from our staff, not from management. So as I said, succession planning was kind of also one of our aims here. And we also wanted to create a better sense of teamwork. So if somebody doesn't know how to do something, they feel quite comfortable asking a colleague to help them with it, and they feel empowered. So in the document that was emailed out, and that should be linked in the chat, this is where I kind of want to hand it back to you guys and start thinking about your own libraries. So I'll give you a few minutes, but on the document, or even just on some scrap paper, I want you to start jotting down, if you were a customer, what would you expect from library staff? And this is from all library staff, so casuals, library assistants, as well as more senior or professional roles. And it could be anything. What does the child on a Saturday morning expect? What does the elderly person on a Friday afternoon expect? You can be as detailed as you like. And I'll just take a pause and give you guys 2 minutes to start jotting things down here. And as I said, feel free to pop things in the chat. Here we go. That's a great question. If you're a solo librarian in a special library, definitely. I think the thing with this model is we can apply it to any space. So we're thinking here about people that come into your library. What would they expect from you when they come in the doors? And what would they expect from people that might be in the role in a year's time, or new people that come on? Could be also what people might expect if they email the library. Yes, can-do attitude, love that. Yeah, if they call your library, if they email your library, what would they expect? You can make this as basic as you like. So you've had a little bit of a brainstorm, and again, this is a working document. There we go. So you can come back to this as needed. You can do this with your staff as well, but this is just a quick little example of the things that we came up with for our library. So we wanted membership. We had a few errors happening with membership, Chromebooks, AP&K printing. We think customers should walk through the doors and the library and we'll know how to help them print, photocopy, search for a book on the catalogue, and then also kind of our more library specific systems, workflows and enterprise. Knowing how to communicate to children, the difference between talking to them versus talking to an adult when it comes to finding a book. Laws, copyright, can I copy this whole book? No, you can't. Why? All those things. And I also just want to say that our things were not this articulate when we first did our brain dump. They were things like driver's license, colour printing. This is just an example of what we came up with. So the next thing is to start thinking about what skills all your library staff have and write them down. And again, you can be as detail focused as you liked. Put a little example of what we did. And then on the right-hand side, you can compare the two and identify the gaps. So I really love in the chat how a lot of people said friendly face is a really big thing. Oh, sorry, can't access the document. I'll just attach it again. Yeah, friendly face is a big thing, and we actually found, yeah, our library staff are really good at that. They're friendly, and we don't think they need customer service training. So we didn't have that as one of our gaps. But you can see there we had printing, scanning, Libby, borrow box, all those things. It's really interesting to look in the chat and see the same things are coming up for people. Connecting to a Wi-Fi network, yeah, it was surprising that staff didn't know how to do that. So I'll give you guys a couple of minutes, and again, you can piece of paper in the chat on that worksheet, jot it down, and I'm just going to attach it again in case no one got it. Chat. This is where I think that even using Zoom can be a really good core competency for staff. I don't know about everyone else, but we've definitely had a few more customers coming in asking how to use Zoom. You can see as well through that chat, I really love also noticing how it's starting to come through that each library will have their own things. Teaching a workshop in an academic setting, I know that's a really important thing to be able to do. Knowing the databases. So now that you've all had a little bit of a brainstorm and a jot down, what do you do with all of this? You found your gaps. So what we did, this is just a little snapshot of all of our notes. And like I said, you can tell it wasn't terribly articulate and planned at the start. But when we had found these gaps between what we thought our customers wanted and what our staff knew, we were able to kind of group them under headings. So it started to look overwhelming, but when we actually looked at each one, we found that they could go under one of several headings. And we called these headings our core competencies. And this is what we came up with. And again, your library might be different. But we found that technology could not be just one thing. We broke it down. So printing, using the APNK computers, using library apps, Libby, BorrowBox, they were kind of their own technology thing. So we had technology 1, 2, 3. Information literacy, that covered things like searching on our catalogue, using workflows, enterprise, or whatever library system you might have. Membership, we got quite a few errors in membership. So actually just knowing the different types and knowing how to modify memberships. Communication, that just refers to knowing how to speak to different groups of people. So the best way to approach, for example, a child versus an adult who needs help. Organizational knowledge, that referred to understanding that we're a council facility. So knowing things like being neutral during local election time, our responsibility to have submission forms available, spaces and patron awareness, that was kind of understanding our users, so they're different ages visiting our library, where things are in the library, like library spaces. We actually found that things were being misshelved, and we needed to do some training around particularly our young adult collection and the manga and the comic books. And librarianship, that was when we started to think about background skills. So knowing the ethics, access to information, Privacy Act, things like how much someone can legally photocopy. So you can see that each of these competencies could really be broken down further. So that was what we did. So on the right-hand side, they were kind of the gaps that we identified, and then on the left, we just grouped them. And some of them, like I said, definitely weightier than others. Technology, a big one. So on the handouts, or again, just on some paper, I'll give you guys a few minutes to go back to the list of gaps you found and notice if there are any themes. And again, you can look at the ones that we found, but your library might have completely different things as well. And these are going to be your core competencies. I'll keep an eye on the chat if there's any questions. I've just seen the question from Kirsten about book advisory. So that's a really good question. We did have readers advisory, so it was on our gaps, and I believe we put that kind of under patron awareness. So there's patron awareness, and that was readers advisory with children. So we did have a training session on that. But then we also, under things, I think it was technology, was when we talked about being able to use the internet and some of our databases to find books. So some of them might come under different categories. You might break them down further. But yeah, we did have that expectation that staff would be able to not necessarily know all the books, but that they know how to, the questions to ask a customer when they come in wanting books similar to the Seven Sisters, and that they know where to find them. Yeah, there's definitely so much. That kind of leads in nicely to the next part of this. Yeah, just seen Alice's question. Yeah, so we did survey staff back in 2019 about what they felt confident or not confident on. But one thing we found is that staff would often say that they felt okay with something like printing, but then when a customer came in the door and asked, this wasn't the case. So yeah, like you said, testing it against their actual capability and confidences. I think there was maybe a little bit of fear in admitting they didn't know something, and that was the culture we wanted to change. With 400 staff, I can imagine that would be really tough. One thing that was also helpful is we have a desk diary where we write down the questions that we get, and that was a good way of identifying what customers are asking for and doing the training on those. And you could see the staff who'd written in the inquiry and then the staff that had helped with it. So we could kind of see, oh, actually, we're getting a lot of questions about Canopy, but it's always this one person who's ending up helping. Oh, so what do you do when you've got this huge page of information of gaps? Like everyone said, there's just so much. Patience is really key here. We looked at this and thought, oh my gosh, we have to know this, we have to do this, we have to do this. But prioritizing it is really essential. So for us, technology, and I imagine that will be the same for a lot of public libraries, that was our priority, and that was printing scanning a driver's license, the front and back, knowing what to do if the Chromebook isn't working. That was our first one we wanted to start with, and then the library apps, and then memberships. So yeah, you'll have your own priorities for your library. But we broke these down into a 3-week approach. So for the first week, in the mornings, usually about 3 mornings in the week, we would run a 20-minute session. This was run by a staff member, and it was delivered to a small group, usually around, it could be between 5 to 15 staff versus doing everyone at once. And the smaller group was really good because that way people feel a bit more comfortable asking questions. So that would happen the first week, and we could do it on different days as a way to capture as many people as possible. Then the second week, we would send out a follow-up survey or activity. So we basically just use Microsoft Forms, nothing fancy, with like 5 questions about what people had done in the training. And there was that expectation that everybody would attend a session and everybody would do the follow-up. And then that final third week was kind of our catch-up week. So people who had been sick or on annual leave, they could attend another 20-minute session, or people who wanted a little bit of a brush up would have another chance to do some more training. So it went for those 3 weeks, and that made it quite easy for us to schedule too. There we go. So this is just a little example of what it looked like for us. We had PowerPoint presentations from the children's library team. And like I said, this was really simple, like TeamSpace. This is how you shelve manga. If people ask for it, this is where the comics are. This is why we do a small times. We had people do training by delivering a small times. We had a little video that someone made. It was 5 minutes on how to use the library app. That was really great because anyone could just watch it in their own time. And then I've just put a little example of one of the follow-up surveys. You can see it didn't need to be really difficult or time intensive. We wanted to make this really easy for staff to be able to do and make it kind of fun. So we also had things like a scavenger hunt someone put together in the library. Surprisingly, our most popular session was on library statistics. And that was because the staff who ran it, they did a Kahoot quiz where they got all of us to get into little teams and then answer questions about things like the most popular books at this branch library, the ages of the people who use this library and those things. And that fell under patron awareness and just helped us understand our community better. So why did this work? Our core competencies, that 3-week approach worked, I think, because it was staff-led. So people felt quite comfortable when it was their colleague in front of them talking, and they felt more comfortable as well during the follow-up. It's much less intimidating asking a colleague for help with something than it can be a manager. But it worked because of the variety of presentations. Like I said, having quizzes or scavenger hunts or PowerPoints or little videos or story times. And the 20-minute approach made it a lot more accessible for staff. The smaller groups, like I said, people felt okay asking questions. And then we had this follow-up questionnaire or activity so they could actually put it into practice. And everyone attended. And I think that was a big thing in making this successful. So our team leaders, even our library manager, attended these sessions. And that just made people accountable. But it also showed, like, hey, management are really valuing and prioritizing this. You should too. And we had our IT guy sitting in a training about downloading Libby. And for him, it was only 20 minutes of his week. So it wasn't really time intensive for him. But for everyone else, it was like, yeah, it's actually okay to not know things. And it's okay to keep learning. So you've got your sheet in front of you. If you've got your core competencies, your learning outcomes there, I thought we could just take a couple of minutes to jot down next to your competencies the names of the staff who might be able to deliver it, and then jot down some timeframes. So don't think about, oh, but we've got this. Just go for it. Just put it down as if there are no barriers, because we are going to talk about barriers. And jot it out using your 3-week block. Mishka, I've just seen your question. Yeah, ensuring all staff are invested, that goes back to what I just said about making sure that everyone attended. So we did actually also, we keep a record of who's attended which session. And we went with that assumption that people would, if we left it up to individuals to attend, they might feel too shy, or they might again feel a bit embarrassed about not knowing something. Whereas when we got everyone to attend, those assumptions were totally gone and people invested more. When you're sitting there and your library manager's next to you, it's really good. I'm glad I answered it. That's a great question. Yep, training sessions could definitely be on Teams or Zoom. I mean, in person is always ideal if we can do it, but when you've got branch libraries, particularly, having someone Zoom in from where they are is definitely an option. And there are little benefits too if you can record the Zoom, and then you've got that lasting resource as well for people who might have been on leave or who were sick. Oh, I just love all the questions coming through. No, we haven't looked how that might fit into the framework, but that could be the next steps for us. It's like I said, I'm always wanting to grow this. So I'm going to jot that down. Cool. So we'll crack on. So it's time for questions as well at the end. So now that you've kind of had a chance to get your competencies and maybe do a little bit of calendar action for when they could be delivered, we got to talk about barriers, because that's why training's a problem, right? So the time is a big one, getting everyone to attend, and that's why we did the 3-week model. So like I said, if someone's not there the first week because they're on leave or they're sick, they could attend the 2nd or 3rd week. But we're also quite a lucky library in that we have that Wednesday morning time where everyone from all the libraries, all different hours, are in the building. So after that Wednesday morning session, full staff meetings, we would often do a quick little 20-minute core competency to try and catch those people who were in town. But like you've just pointed out, you could Zoom it, you could film it. And sometimes we do also have staff just talk to the presenter and they sort out their own time to go over the training. So somebody who has missed it all, they'll just look at their calendar and be like, hey, we've both got 10 minutes free. Maybe you could go over it with me then. And that really helps it work. Another thing that's become a bit of a barrier, was at the start, was keeping it on track. So really peeling it back to asking ourselves, is this benefiting the customer? Is this for all library staff, casuals, library assistants, and so on? It can be quite easy. It was almost like a catchphrase. If something popped up, someone would say, oh, we'll do a core competency on it. And you can really go down an endless rabbit hole of that. But really pausing, asking yourself, is it essential? Is it benefiting our customer? Or is this actually something just for the reference librarians or the specialist librarians? Is this actually something that only the team leaders need to do? So that's where we go back to our learning outcomes, and making sure that we're still sticking within those, and if it's appropriate for everyone. Accountability. At the start, that was a bit of a barrier. So having management attend was really good at making people accountable, but we also did keep a record, or a roll, I guess, of who'd attended the sessions. And there were at the start a few staff who weren't turning up, and we just had conversations with their team leader and they would remind them to do it. So I think if you do implement something like this, making it really clear what the expectations are to staff at the very beginning, and then for those first few sessions, making sure that they attend and following up straight away is really important, because it's just become a habit now. Like staff know, oh, that's my core competency in 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm going to attend that. And the follow-up survey is also another really good way of keeping people accountable, because we send out the answers to them as well. And another barrier, stuff changing. So our building has, some of you may have seen, been closed for the past year due to earthquake repairs. And the process of reopening that, of having staff move on, that's made it harder to prioritize training. But one thing that's really good with our model is that it's proven to be flexible and adaptable. So when we were suddenly working at home because of a sudden lockdown, because of a sudden earthquake closure, we could just switch this training online. And we've also made it quite flexible so that these competencies aren't set in stone. So we've got our rough schedule, but if something important comes up, we'll just change things around. And so, for example, when the changes to the Privacy Act happened, I think end of 2021, we just pushed back the core competency that was scheduled and did one on the Privacy Act and librarianship, so people understood what those changes were. And One thing that we have done, which I think is really important to getting staff accountable and engaged, is we've done follow-up surveys about the core competencies model itself. So this again was just like a Microsoft form. It was anonymous. We asked staff what they thought of it, what they wanted to see more of, what they wanted to see less of, and what they wanted to keep doing. Just 3 key questions. And we had some really nice feedback, which some happy librarians. I just want to share some of their comments that they had. One of the feedback things we had from them was that they'd like to have it recorded to return to. So that's kind of something we've started doing a bit more of. At the very beginning, we weren't sending out the answers to the follow-up questionnaires or activities. So we started doing that. But they also asked for more training around biculturalism and mihi. So we've started doing that now as well. There's a mihi training. And that just makes people more engaged when they feel like they're actually helping to create the training and that it's valuable for them on the job. So I think that, in a nutshell, is what we did to make our core competency model. I've put some resources there. These are the American Library Association, their core competency statement, and their current core competencies, which are really helpful to read through. Most of the things actually overlap, but again, it is American specific. So there are definitely things in New Zealand, biculturalism, that's a big thing that we've put into our training. And I've always put my email address, so do feel free to email me any questions, any concerns, or just like if you do something like this, how it's going. I really hope that from the worksheet and that brainstorming, that this just provides a starting point for a model for your library. And it might be something that you do with your staff. It might be something to do with your team leaders and managers. But whatever it is, yeah, feel free to share it with me, to ask me questions. And we've still got 10 minutes. Yay! So please do put through any questions in the chat and I'll attempt to answer them. Oh, thank you for sharing that framework. Thanks, Jessica. Oh, thank you. I really am hoping it's useful. And yeah, the number of people here, I think it's kind of nice to see that training our library staff is hard. And yes, I can send out the PowerPoint. I'll send it to Angela and she can circulate with you guys.
Yep, that's fine. We'll do that.
I will stop my screen sharing. Oh, really good question. So we've looked at Niche Academy, haven't used it. We haven't used any pre-prepared resources, mainly because we just haven't found any that kind of work for us. So I know there are things like BorrowBox have little training videos that you can use, but they just didn't quite suit our needs, but definitely not opposed to it if you find something good out there, or even just finding a resource out there that you can use as your starting point and then modify for your library.
Can I ask a question, Rosamund? Is there any sort of national sort of training that LIANZA could help with? You know, is there something like basic copyright that we could help with at all?
Oh, that would be great. I can imagine that, yeah, those librarianship things that are touched upon, like copyright and freedom of information, those things would be really beneficial because they are, yeah, applied to all libraries.
Yep.
Whether they're yeah, I know LIANZA used to have like those 5-10 minute little YouTube videos. It was quite a few years ago, and there were things like 5 minutes on Facebook. So those kind of things I can imagine would be helpful.
Yeah, well, we have actually raised some of this, so it's just trying to find the right people, but we'll keep talking about it.
Yeah.
And so it's on copyright and privacy and
Yeah. Yeah, I guess Treaty of Waitangi, those kind of things too. I know Te Rapa Whakahau, they do some really good training. Their in-person sessions, but yeah, those things that really can be applied to all libraries.
yeah.
I've just seen Alice's question. So our sessions were mostly in person. We have done on Zoom when we've closed suddenly and we've had a little video. But e-learning, I personally would like to film more of them and put more of them onto an e-learning platform, because I think then you've got this great resource when you have new staff start, or if somebody isn't feeling particularly confident, they can in their own time go back and watch something again. There's just that little risk, I guess, of training maybe becoming irrelevant, or things like overdrive changing, and then you might have to change your model. But
You'd have to make sure they were updated, regularly updated.
Yeah. So then you, when we've talked about it, it's always been, oh, is this going to create too much work? Oh, thank you, Deborah, for sharing that. Yeah, it can be hard to sift through some of the stuff out there and make it relevant. I know when we did like the Privacy Act changes, we talked about it in relationship to like our library membership. So why it's important not to share those details and to keep screens turned away from customers when you're looking up membership details, or with children when they have a guardian come in, why it's important that if one guardian has come in and they're not the guarantor, we can't let them access their children's record, those kind of things. So yeah, it can be hard when it's coming from that point of view rather than a library or patron one, like you said. Yeah, if there's no more questions, like I said, just give me an email and I'll send Angela the PowerPoint. But thank you so much for your time today. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosamund. That was a really worthwhile session. Thank you. And if there's no more questions, I will close with a karakia. Anuia, anuia, anuia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia mama te nākau, te tinana, te wairua e te ara tangata. Koia rā e rongo, whakairia aki ki runga, kia tina, huie, taikie. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and a big thank you to Rosamund. And we will send out the links to the PowerPoint and the video. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Lots of thank yous there, Rosamund.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Angela.
That's great. Okay, thanks now.
See ya.